I think that if you're an adult, you should definitely go see the movie, even though I've told you the whole plot line. Because me saying this and you actually seeing and conveying the weight of that are two entirely different things. Welcome to the Honest Youth Pastor YouTube channel, the channel that helps believers use biblical discernment in all aspects of life. Today, I wanted to talk to you guys about The Sound of Freedom, the movie Sound of Freedom. You've probably heard of it. You've probably seen a little bit of the trailer, or maybe you've actually went to the movies and seen it. The point is that it's available now. It's out. It's been out since the 4th. And if you haven't seen it, I think it's worth a watch through, and I'll tell you why. I think there's actually quite a few reasons for it. As far as the movie goes, right? So there are just a warning for anyone watching this video, right? Warning for anybody watching this video. There are going to be spoilers. I'm just gonna give you some spoilers in regards to that. Not that there's like a whole lot to spoil. There's not like some surprise ending or something, but there will be some parts of like what goes on in the movie that's not in this trailer. It's a heavy movie. Right. So here's one of the things that you need to know going into it right away, I think that's assumed. You're dealing with, this horrible thing of child trafficking and everything that goes in with that. So you should expect that the movie is going to be pretty heavy, but it very much is, right? So if you've ever been to like the Holocaust Museum, if you've ever went to like anything that has to do with that Titanic, like those are those types of feelings, right? So you go to these events, you learn about history, pretty dark history, and then you go away with just like this weight to you. That's what you're going to get if you go to this movie. That's exactly what you're going to, walk away with, is a heaviness to you. Now, again, I think that should be assumed. You're going to go see a movie that's very much dealing with dark stuff. So let's kind of talk about the 3-act structure of the movie, because it's very important, I think, to understand sort of how they sort of build out this story. Obviously, this story is based on the story of how Tim Ballard started his organization. And the first part of the movie deals with from what I understand, a fictional set of children being sort of lured into this sort of talent agency, and that talent and ad agency being used as a way to get these children into this trade. And so the movie starts off like that. That's the first act of the movie. It starts off with those children. Then you move on to Tim Ballard, sort of his day-to-day life in Homeland Security and everything that he has to deal with that. And the good thing about this movie, like this is something that I think is pretty hard to depict in a movie, and it's a really fine line to walk, but they're able to have you feel the heaviness of what is the stuff that Tim Ballard has to watch in order to write his reports, at the same time not even showing you even close to like, without knowing, basically, right? You know what's happening and you feel the weight of it. And that's really where Jim conveys this pretty well. He really, really conveys the weight of what Tim Ballard and, agents like Tim have to deal with still on a daily basis, with viewing videos and material like this and writing reports so that they can put people away that participate in this sort of thing. And you really feel that in the first act. You understand why Tim sort of is emotionally tore up at the beginning of the movie. But that's the first act. And basically, Tim is thrown into this idea of like, how can I help these children beyond what I'm already doing? And then that sends him down a path of trying to figure out how to capture the people that put these children in these positions. And that's the second act of the movie. The first act is Tim captures a predator, finds out how to, put more charges on that predator because he's able to deliver a child. He not only saves that child, but in the movie, that child sort of propels him into wanting to save this little boy's sister, and that propels us into the second act. Now, that child and that sister, as far as I can tell from the interview, aren't like real children, but they're based on a real boy that Tim wanted to save, and that drove him into everything that he does now. And so this little boy is based on a real little boy. That gets us into the second act, where Tim puts together a team, actually leaves Homeland Security, and sets up basically a huge sting operation in which he's able to save 50 kids on this island that they set up as this kind of this trap, essentially, essentially for predators and to save kids. Now, one of the things that I did read that they don't portray in the movie is that not only in real life did that sting operation save 50 kids, it saved like 100 and something adults too that were also trapped in the trade industry. And so they're able to do all of that. And that's the second act, right? So you have this propelled sense of heaviness, helping you understand what's driving Tim Ballard to go and to do what he's doing. And you totally understand the links that he's going to try to save these kids. And then you have the third act. Now, when you get to the third act, again, I've told you this is a spoiler, so just to have you know, Tim is trying to save this little boy's sister. He thought that they were going to be able to save this little boy's sister on this island sting. She's not there. In the movie adaptation of what the story is, she's actually been sold to another guy that's in the deeper jungles, and then Tim has to go on a solo mission to go save her and bring her out. And that's where like the third act kind of goes into unbelievable territory. Like the first and second act are based on actual events that happened, and you can sort of see that like they are feasible things that happened. The third act is Tim going in to retrieve this girl by himself in the middle of basically a drug encampment in the deep dark jungle, right? And he is able to save her all by himself, which when I was watching it, I was like, this is a bit like we went from noble mission to action story. And that part, as far as I've read, like that didn't happen. That was just sort of an addition. And it sort of feels like an addition to the movie when you're watching it, because you have this momentum going. They stop, they capture all of these traffickers, save all these kids on the island, and then the story's kind of done. Like that was the mission. But they have this third act that sort of adds to it. Let me say this. I think that if you're an adult, you should definitely go see the movie. Even though I've told you the whole plot line, because me saying this and you actually seeing and conveying the weight of that are two entirely different things. Like in the theater I was in, there were probably 15 of us maybe, and the people that weren't crying at different parts of the movie, those others of us were holding it back really well, because there's all these parts, especially if you have kids, that like you can't get away from the reality that some of those kids are your kids' age. And so that weighs on you when you're watching the movie. And so that's one of the things that I think you should, like, if you're an adult, go see. Not as like, oh no, like this whole fear thing or this, I don't know, could this happen to my kids? But just the reality of understanding, like, there are real children that are your kids' age that are going through this in other parts of the world. And so you go through all of this in the movie. You get to the end, it goes through the credits. At the very end, there's a message from him in which he's imploring people to, share the tickets, share the movie, pay it forward so other people can see the movie. And that part was a little like, it was good and odd at the same time. Like there was no real action statement at the end. Like, hey, this is what you can do, right? But it was just sort of, hey, share this movie with other people, and not really an actionable item of like, how can you actually do something to help this? Even though the movie itself doesn't give you any actionable items at the end, the two recommendations that we've gotten for the comments I think are good, right? So you have, communicating to people that there are a lot of things that can be done in regards to videos online, corn online that people watch, as well as talking to your state representatives about penalties and laws to more harshly punish people that participate in those activities. And then something else you said at the bottom here, securing the borders where these kids are coming across is also another thing. Tim Ballard, in a couple of the interviews, he talks about that as well, that many of these kids are coming across the border and are untraceable already. And so you have no clue who they are, where they're coming from, where they're going, and are just fed right into this system. Now, the one thing that I was impressed with, that I was glad they included, because the entire movie is set in different countries, right? I think maybe you're in the States a couple times in the actual movie, but at the end of the movie, they make it very clear, plain, simple, big white letters on the screen, that America is the number one place that kids are trafficked to. And so they're like, just so you know, the demand for this is America. That's the demand for it. And so this idea that just to open your eyes to where this isn't some random thing that happens, far off away some other place, but that it happens here. Now, again, I really wish they would have had some actionable item at the end of this movie. They've pulled you emotionally through, rightfully so, through 2 hours and 15 minutes of saying, like, this is a real thing that really happens. And then they're just like, good luck, share the movie with other people. So what's really interesting to me about what some of the news, articles talking about has like said, how this movie is like a QAnon conspiracy movie and sort of, extreme right wing sort of thing. And what I've been really encouraged by is there's a lot of like movie review channels that I watch, and the few that I did watch after getting home from seeing the movie agreed that this isn't like a left or right issue. This is a save the kids issue. There's a lot of people that have given flack to Jim Caviezel for sure. I hope I'm saying his name right, but I might be not. But to Jim or even Tim Ballard for the things they've said in interviews. But like the reality is, like evil exists in the world. Okay, so it's not unfathomable to say that obviously way worse things happen than what they've said in interviews. But there's terrible things that happen in the world, essentially. And so where does that leave us, right? So here's the sum of the movie. Should you see it? Of course you should. 100%. Are there going to be things that you're like, man, that acting wasn't great, or some of that dialogue was a little bit clunky? Yeah, all of those things you're going to see because that is true. Like there's some things that you're just like, that's, that could have been better. But that's a movie critical sort of thing. The storyline in general, what it's bringing to light, what it's talking about, how it talks about it, all are things that I think you should see. Like I would say, go to the Holocaust Museum. Like I would say, you should probably, visit the Titanic memorials in certain places in the United States, because it really gives you the weight of this really happens and this really occurs. And you need to sit with it for a minute. Sit with the reality that evil exists in the world, but don't just stay there. See, one of the things I was thinking through after I saw this movie when I was driving home was that, like, how good is God's grace to us that this isn't the only evil in the world, but that this depth of evil exists. Like, again, when you listen to Tim Ballard talk about the videos that he's had to watch, the PTSD that's given him, the stress, the anxiety, the emotional damage that's happened. When you hear a couple of the interviews that Jim gives about watching some of this to get in the head of Tim Ballard, that man's messed up from it, which of course you would be. So you sit there as a believer and you say, like, wow, like that evil exists in the world. And then juxtapose that with the gospel. Like, how good is God's grace? Like, how good is God's grace that he would come and save sinners such as us? Right? I mean, that he is fully aware that type of sin exists, that type of evil exists, that type of dehumanization exists. And he would still save us. He would still give us a way back to him, a transformation of our hearts and minds. It's just crazy. Because that evil does exist. And the only way, ultimately, to fix it is for the gospel to go forward. Obviously, there's other ways, organizations and stuff like that, but that's ultimately the difference maker. I think at the end of the day, what this movie does is bring something to the surface that you already knew about, but you really weren't paying much attention to, shows you how evil it is, and then says, okay, now go do something about it. So anyway, guys, highly recommend you go see Sound of Freedom. There probably are free tickets in your area. If you follow Angel Studios, they've been just sharing that like crazy. Check if there's free tickets in your area. And if there are, take advantage of that and then go see the movie. And I'd love to know what you think in the comment section below. I'll talk to you later.